I was born in 1835 in Newcastle. It was an exciting time for the city. Buildings were being knocked down to make room for great grey stone structures. The Industrial Revolution was in full swing, and the city and its production grew every year. I saw Queen Victoria when I was 14. She visited Newcastle to open the new railway station, and everyone came to see her. I never felt the hunger pangs of poverty, but we were by no means wealthy. My father was a dock worker at the Port of Tyne. The North was built on workers like him. In 1854, my life took a drastic change. A fire broke out across the city, burning down many of our friends' and family's homes, and Britain was at war with Crimea. It was the first time war had ever been shown the way it truly was. Newspapers printed stories and even early photographs made their way to the UK. I felt the need to join, so after the fire, I offered my space in my house to my younger cousin and joined the army. It was here, I believe, the strange story of my life truly began. One day, I was on patrol and stumbled down a pit, and at the bottom I discovered a wounded Russian soldier. He had been shot in his abdomen and had already lost a lot of blood. Standard protocol meant I should have killed him as soon as I saw him, but he was no threat, and he was going to die anyway. Instead of killing him, I offered him my flask and helped him drink from it. He asked my name and told me he had a nephew also called William. I don't recall his name now, though. From his pocket, he pulled out a golden amulet. It was like a cross, but the top was curved over, and it was adorned with strange hieroglyphics that glimmered in the light. He called it his ankh and pressed it firmly into my hand. He told me a story not entirely unlike the story I am now telling you. How he had lived for hundreds of years, and that the ankh grants almost everlasting life. Of course, the rational part of me took it as the ramblings of a dying madman. But the second the ankh touched my skin, I felt indescribably different, and I knew what he was saying was true. I asked about his injury and why the ankh didn't prevent that. He explained that the power of the ankh was limited. It could only slow down aging, not prevent death altogether. He also told me I must keep it on me, or at least near me, at all times for it to work. He had a backpack with more gold in it than I could even imagine. He told me it was mine to keep, but that I had to meet the guild first, and that if I didn't, they would find me. He said I had no choice, so reluctantly, I agreed. His final words were words of warning. "The guild is more powerful than you could possibly imagine," he said. "If you cross them, they will kill you." As he died, I closed his eyes and wrapped a coat I found in his bag over his body. I walked south toward the coastline as he instructed. The boat was exactly where he said it would be. Rowing was difficult with the gold weighing the boat down, and the fog made it hard to see the island he described. But eventually, I found it, and I found the square stone he said would be on the island's west coast. The stone was even larger than he described, a monolith facing out toward the sea. The same hieroglyphic patterns that were on the strange relic in my hand also covered the stone. As he instructed, I then lit a fire in front of it. I waited about 6 hours before I saw the flicker of an oil lantern approaching from the sea. A small vessel eventually revealed itself through the fog. 3 men came ashore, each with rifles drawn and aimed at me. I threw my arms up in surrender, but they didn't lower their guns. I repeated the passphrase the dying man told me, "Pisces, Pisces," over and over again. Only then did they lower their weapons. They asked who I was, and I explained how I'd come to be here and what had happened to the man. They shared a look with each other before telling me to board the boat. That was the last thing any of them said to me for a journey that lasted days. We arrived on another island. I never did learn where. I was ushered through castle ruins into a room with the most marvelous decor. The room hosted the most impressive display of historical artifacts I, even to this day, have ever seen. There were Roman and Greek sculptures that would be the prized possession of any museum nowadays. Their condition kept immaculate and preserved through the ages. The walls were covered with paintings from many different cultures and art styles. A grand table laden with golden chalices and glistening silverware stretched the length of the room. Around the table were 10 seats. One of the men I sailed with gestured toward one of them, then left. I waited half an hour before the door again opened. 9 robed men entered the room, each taking one of the remaining seats at the table. Servers entered and poured each one, as well as me, a drink, and shortly after food was brought in. Then attention shifted toward me, and the interrogation began. I retold the story of how I got to be here. They were friendly, but insistent, and if I didn't answer something to their satisfaction, they probed for further detail until I did. Some of the questions were not even related to the dying man, but were philosophical or moral questions. After 2 hours of deep interrogation, they seemed satisfied. The guild had lasted for millennia, they explained. The council, which I was sitting in front of, was the highest form of decision-making in the guild, and was comprised of its 9 oldest members. Some members had even been on the council for over 1,000 years. They then told me about the object I had in my pocket. They told me it granted almost everlasting life, and that this ankh was now mine, and I should always keep it close to my heart. There's a button on the ankh, they explained, which allows you to duplicate it once every 10 years. This is how the guild grows. The ankh is the most powerful item ever gifted to man, but its power, they warned, is alluring. To some, even all-consuming. Throughout the millennia of the guild's existence, the guild kept the ankh secret, but they also kept it under control. Many people became corrupted by the ankh. Its power corrupted thoughts, turning otherwise kind, caring people into thoughtless, selfish monsters, intent only on self-gain at the expense of everybody else. They had a name for people who were beyond saving from its influence. The Crows. They also told me about the rules. Most of them, understandably, had to do with avoiding attention. The secrecy of the guild and the power of the ankh was the most important thing, and the lengths they would go to maintain this secrecy were violent and excessive. If I wanted to get married and have children, I had to have my wife approved beforehand. They told me I had to change my name, that I could never go back home, and that I would never see my family again. The punishment for doing so, they said, was death. I left the island rich beyond my wildest dreams, but entirely alone. For the first time in my life, I had not one friend or family member I could talk to. I emigrated to New York and spent the next 20 years learning from the guild. I learned how to invest and how to stay anonymous. I met my lifelong friends, John Wesson and Willow Green, both members of the guild themselves. Though I did miss my family, life was good and peaceful. In 1878, I met Emma. I fell in love from the moment I saw her. She was smart, beautiful, but most importantly, she made me laugh. It was 3 years before I told her about the ankh, the guild, and how old I really was. She, of course, didn't believe me at first, but after meeting John and Willow, she came to realize I wasn't joking. She was so nervous when it came time to meet the guild. I always knew I wanted to marry her, but with the guild and the life consequences of joining, I took it slowly. She she was given the task of delivering a case full of gold across the country. She was told the value of it and promised that it was entirely untraceable, and that, if she wanted, she could leave with it forever and there would be no repercussions. There was a part of me that was frightened she would. She was inducted into the guild a week later. We bought this house together. New York had tired us both out, and after being inducted into the guild, Emma was needing a new identity and location to live. Life with Emma was perfect. She continued to make me laugh, and every day I was excited to discover something more about her. I felt like the luckiest man in the world, knowing that this dream I was living would last for hundreds, possibly even thousands of years. You probably wouldn't believe it, but this house was new once. The estate you see around you now, with its modern brick buildings, noisy children and cars on every driveway, was once our humble farm. When she told me she was pregnant, I was so excited to raise a child with her. We talked endlessly about what the child would be when they grew up, how they would put an end to war and poverty, how they would raise their own family and we would have a town full of grandchildren and great-grandchildren to watch over. She died during childbirth in 1895. Both the children survived. We were going to name them George and Joseph, but Emma liked Charles better than Joseph, so I named them George and Charles.